Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome, my dear students, to the next lecture, rather, the remaining part of the chapter that we started in the previous class. And the title, of course, remains the same, but the subtitle titles will be different. So, the main title, as you can see here, we are discussing theoretical components in interpreter and translator training. We can also rephrase this topic with, theoretical components in translation pedagogy. So far, of course, this is the book. We have adopted this chapter from this book, Basic Concepts and Models for Interpreter and Translator Training. We have discussed 5 points earlier in the previous lecture, and in this lecture we are going to discuss the remaining 6, or actually 4 points, because as you can see, the point number 9 has been deleted. We are not going to discuss in this lecture, because in this point the author is discussing his models for translation pedagogy or for translation training. And because we are not studying the whole book, so no need to go through this, but you can of course go through these models, and if you develop an interest, you must read this book completely. So let's start. Point number 6 was, or is potential benefits of theoretical components in interpreter and translator training. What are the benefits? Here we are going to discuss the benefits can be that we can have while we are including the theoretical components in any translation curriculum. Of course, practical exercises in any translation program, short, medium, or long program, whatever, are the core of the curriculum in all programs without any disagreement. There is no debate on that. That practical exercises are essential for the curriculum. Uh, but although we have opinions about the duration, progression, or types of material used, or the admission standards or graduation standards, etc., for that purpose. But the theoretical courses are also found in an increasing number of syllabi. Of course, the theory is always very useful, but the usefulness of the theory is often challenged on two grounds: that the theories are abstract, they are just like philosophies, and they are beyond the level of the students, or they cannot be, they cannot be catched, or they cannot be grasped easily. And of course, they are when theories are discussed in the classroom, and they are discussed and they appear to be as very remote thing. They are not connected with some real life situation. Usually this is the biggest, objection on the theory in translation curriculum. Anyways, but there are benefits of theoretical components. What are those benefits? You can see the points in this slide. Courses in translation theory can help future translators and interpreters advance faster and better in mastery of professional skills. Because they understand the principles, they understand the rules, they understand the strategies. Why I am translating, for example, one word with different words in different documents, because there is always a theoretical framework behind this, because there is always research behind this, and this research tells the translator or the teacher of the translator that a single word in a source language, or a source language A, should be translated with, you know five words available in the target language. So, and what are the reasons? And in that context, the theory, of course, is very helpful. Theory also enrich the conceptual framework of reference and knowledge. It's very obvious. Theory also raised the social status of the translation professions. I think I have indicated this point earlier, but here I would like to emphasize that if you know the terminologies of your field, if you have the good command over the jargon of that field, here of course translation studies, if you have this kind of background in your mind, and when you present yourself and your profession to the people, of course you are in a better position to present it in a very decent way, in a very dignified way, and hence you enhance your status. uh, the next benefit could be this: translation theory is a guide to translation practice. This can be understood in the light of the first one. Of course, the translation practice is not, devoid of any principle or any rules or any strategies, procedures, and so on. Theory can be more effective. Of course, now we are coming to the implementation side also. It can be more effective in these cases. These are just examples. That this list is not exhaustive. There are other examples. There can be other examples that can be discussed under this. Why do authors write the way they do? Because through theory here help the translators, and of course the teachers and translators, to understand why do authors write the way they do. There are psychological reasons, there are linguistic reasons, there are reasons related to the theme, there may be reasons, social reasons, and of course a couple of other reasons, uh, like the agenda, the purpose, the objective of writing, and so on. Why do speakers make ungrammatical sentences in a consecutive or in a simultaneous situations in an interpreting? And the theory, of course, is it provides a detailed description of or answers to this why. What does it mean to understand a verbal statement? There are strategies devised for translating the verbal statement, and why understanding the verbal statement is very important, in especially in interpretation and in translation as well. How are written or oral statements perceived and processed by the human mind? Of course, this is related to the cognitive processes, psychological cognitive processes, by the translators and by the interpreters. So theory is very relevant, theory is very important. And also this situation, why it is difficult to re-express the same message in a different language. Of course, this is the challenge faced by the translators and interpreters. Why is there linguistic interference between two working languages during translation? The linguistic interference is like, if I translate a sentence uh, from uh, uh, from the Arabic language. Let's take the example of this marartu bi baytihi. Marartu bi baytihi, and focus on the word bi. And of course, I would say that I passed by his house. I passed by his home, or maybe I passed with his home. So what we see is with here is the in this case is is the linguistic interference there, here and there. Examples of linguistic interferences can be discussed in the classroom, because I want to confine my talk here on the theoretical aspects of this lecture. Why do interpreters in the booth sometimes fail to understand very simple speech segments? There can be many because the theoretical research or the research based theories, they provide answers to these situation, and of course by virtue of knowledge gained inside the classroom, theoretical knowledge gained inside the classroom, the translators or interpreters, here in this case the interpreter, can solve the problem. uh, why is it acceptable to change some information elements when translation? Why should interpreters spend a little time and effort as possible on note taking in consecutive? Why do many translators say one should only translate into one's native tongue, and why do others challenge this view? All these points or questions actually revolve around the theoretical framework in the area of translation studies. Theoretical concepts and models can help prevent strategic and tactical errors, of course. Um, if we take the example of interpretation, the uh, while you are sitting in the simultaneous interpreting, the theoretical the theory suggests, or the rules principles suggest that while sitting in the booth you should not stop at any point. Sometimes you are unable to understand, sometimes there are technical problems, and due to those technical problems the translator interpreter is unable to follow the speech, or there are very difficult words used by the speaker. The interpreter should not never stop interpreting. And there are, of course, techniques taught inside the classroom how to handle this situation. Theoretical components also help in choosing appropriate strategies and tactics when faced with new situations not met during the training program, and appropriate strategies for market forces such as financial needs, client demands, or misperception of work by third parties. So if I mean this is if a translator spent a good time, let's say 1 year, 2 year, or complete degree program in an institution where the whole education is going on, education of translation and interpretation, and he or she would be better off dealing with all these situations, because the theoretical components become very helpful and beneficial for him or her. So I think inside the classroom I would expect questions to discuss this debate. There's in the literature there's a long debate on the points that we have discussed here partially and fully, but the main debate revolve around this one: the should we include theoretical components, especially at BS level, or especially as the program that target producing translators and interpreters. So we can, of course, expand our debate when we meet, inshallah, on Tuesday. The next point in this lecture is the potential criteria rules for theoretical components for training. With this point, we also understand the writer of this book, the author, is in the favor of theoretical components in any translation pedagogy. Now, he is suggesting the criteria and rules for theoretical components for training, and this section would tell us the more about how the theoretical components can be beneficial indirectly, and also how the beneficial the theoretical components uh, mm, should be included and how they should be implemented. And he has discussed design rules, two design rules and two implementation rules. Design rules are: rule number one, direct relevance to students' need. Rule number two is simplicity, and we'll discuss in detail after some time. Implementation rules also are two. Number one is the readiness, and rule number two is the referred. So let's discuss these mm, design rules and implementation rules for the theoretical components that can be used in. But remember one thing: all the scholars, all the debate is about the programs that, let's say in our case, we are talking about BS translation and interpretation. We are not talking about MS translation studies, or we can say these things are relevant to, let's say, the certificate in professional translating and interpreting, or diploma in professional translating and interpreting. Means all that are designed or that are prepared to produce practical translators, translating purposes. What are the design rules? Design rule number one is direct relevance to students' need. And the theoretical components should be directly relevant to the students' need. They should provide answers to questions and problems actually faced by the students while they are learning, translating, or interpreting. They of course they face problems in problems related to the grammar. They face problems related to the cultural aspects of the language. They also face problems related to the text type that they are translating or learning to translate or interpret. They also face problems in using effective use of dictionary. They also face problem in using the CAT tools, in using the translation technology, and long list going on. Actually happens inside the classroom. So when they, the theoretical components should provide the answers to the questions raised by the problems or problems by the students, or problems faced by the students while they are actually learning translation. These should not contain many more concepts um, about the, let's say, not a teacher should not teach a complete theory, let's say the theory of shifts, in an isolated way, and the students cannot relate the details of that. Rather, when they are doing the translation, the theoretical component or parts of that theory can be taught in between. Design rule number two is the simplicity. Simplicity is that the theoretical component should be designed to so that they are easy to grasp. The language, the phrases that are used to explain. I mean, things should be brought down to the level of the students, and also they should be a relevance to their situation. Simple logical structure, not the philosophical, proper balance and simplicity, and pedagogical purposes. Why we are, for example, teaching this part of that theory here in this course. So the pedagogical purposes should be very clear to the teacher and of course to the developers of that curriculum, that why we are including this in that course. Implementation rules, again we have two implementation rule. One is the readiness, and means the should be taught after student sensitization. Student should its sense should be create among in the minds of the students, and after that that theoretical part or that theoretical framework should be mentioned or taught. And when students have been made aware of the phenomenon and their implications, if the question is equivalence, the students are facing problems, let's say one word, and they are searching the meaning of that word in a dictionary, and they find that there are more than 15 words mentioned for this word. So which word is relevant to that? So the question of equivalence can be discussed here while they are facing this problem. And the processing capacity, there is an example on the slide that you can see is processing capacity limitations and the student failure to understand its implication. This is relevant to the interpretation that the human mind, they have limited processing capacity, and they cannot go beyond that limited processing capacity. So and they should be, you should be taught the theoretical aspects of that, that part of the mental work in the in interpretation. Implementation rule number 2 is that they should be referred, not repeated, to repeatedly throughout the course. In a translation course or in an interpretation course, the theoretical things that have been taught earlier can be mentioned time and again, but at the right time, not irrelevant. They should be referred when the same situation is faced by the students, or the same problem is faced by the students. That theoretical part can be mentioned once again. It's kind of reference to what has been taught earlier. Referred during the correction of practical translation exercises for the sake of impact, because this will of course help in inculcating the concept in the minds of the students in a very very effective way, that they will not forget these things. Okay, we have the next point, which is where and how to find theoretical components for translator training. And we have three things to do. Of course, where and how to find. Of course, where and how to find theoretical components for translator training. Theoretical components. There are a lot of books. Thousands of books have been written on in English only, in Arabic as well, in Urdu now. Nowadays, people are at least translating books from English into Urdu as well. So theoretical components are available in the books of theories written by the translation scholars, or in translation history books, or in other material that discuss the theoretical phenomena of translation. And what is the best strategy to get benefit from these theoretical components? uh, Number one is adopt, number two is adapt, number three is develop. Adopt means that the components developed by others. So you, as a teacher or the curriculum developers, you can adopt one chapter, you can adopt partial part of the chapter, you can adopt part of the article, you can adopt the examples that have been mentioned, you can adopt the whole book is another way of adoption. This is not this requires not much effort, of course. But adapt means the existing components developed by others. So the teachers or the translator curriculum developers, here they are required to select and change, adapt to the situation of their students. Of course, there's a little more work is required in this case, that they add their own examples, that they change the language style, they change the sequence of the thoughts of the material, that they change the a couple of other things that they select, and when they adapt it to a certain situation. This is very near to developing, actually, based on the existing material. And number three is develop, of course, the most highest and prestigious kind of work in translation pedagogy is that you develop the components. Developing components is, there is a long of course strategies available, that you read the that particular component different books. And of course, when you think that I have now grasped whatever is available in the literature, so you can start developing In the beginning, you adapt, and then you, of course, bring changes, a lot of changes in that, in a way that ultimately your material or your book or your text becomes totally different from other sources. Actually, the if you ask me how to reach the development of the material to be taught inside the classroom, I would say we should start with the simplest step, which is adopt, and passing through the adapt, and then reaching to develop. And of course, the process of development continues with the improvement and with addition and with, updating the material and so on and so forth. Explanations have we have already made the theoretical components difficult to find in the literature. This is true. I fully agree. On this point for the BS translation courses. Most of the theories are research oriented rather than teaching oriented. So a lot of difference between when a theory is described, uh, presented, as a research oriented document, or a theory is prepared as a teaching oriented document. Because in the teaching oriented document, the mm, the the model of textbook preparation is the main consideration. But when the theory is presented as research oriented method, the model is the philosophical discussions, and the jargon is very difficult in this case. Books offering practical ideas on teaching translation with some theoretical references is good source. Some components could be developed on the basis of observation without much theoretical background. They can also be, of course, for that, the teachers, then they should be experienced teachers. They can do when they are experienced. Uh, Point number 8, because it's very practical for you people, because actually the point number 7 and 8 both, because we can link these 2 points to the next lecture in this course. That would be, the development of curriculum. That would be about the development of the curriculum, in my view. In the whole chapter, remember that, don't forget the components that we have discussed, the components, four basic components. Don't forget them, because they are very very important for understanding the translation pedagogy or the translation curriculum. And number 7 and 8, because they are very much practical. They have value uh, for practical purposes, and these three can be linked with what we shall be doing in our lecture number 8 in this course. With this note, we can go to the number 10. As I said, number 9 is skipped. We are not going to discuss it. So number 10 is the main ideas. Here we are going just to quickly revise what we have learned in this chapter, and this is his style. And the Daniel Giles' style is that to in the end of the chapter, to present a summary of the chapter in this. So we have discussed in this chapter, formal translator training is not an absolute necessary. Absolute necessary. Remember this. In the research areas, or when the analysis is done, the words are used, with the utmost care. So not an absolute necessary, but it can help beginning translators improve their performance faster. So this is the view that have been established by the author. Number 2, interpreters, translators must have good passive knowledge of their passive working languages, good command of their active working languages, adequate work knowledge, good command of the principles and techniques of translation, Training needs vary depending on the trainee's pre-existing knowledge and skills, of course. Needs are assessed on the basis of the pre-existing knowledge and skills, owned by the learners. In order to optimize programs, a distinction between initial training programs, longer 2 years to 5 year program, and further training programs is useful. Of course, we have done it, and our concepts are very clear about that. Formal training needs to be optimized in order to be a truly better option than on the job training, which has distinct advantages in terms of relevance, finances, actual translation practices. The process oriented approach focuses on principles, methods, and procedures rather than on the translation project. It can be a more powerful teaching tool during the initial part of training. Uh, must uh, but must be complemented by more traditional result oriented correction for fine tuning. Of course, as we have gone through earlier, he is suggesting a sequence for implementing this process oriented and then product oriented approach, that it should be linked in the later stages to the product oriented approach. Theoretical components in interpreted translate training can contribute to better understanding of phenomena, difficulties, and strategies and tactics, thus helping students advance further and faster and maintain appropriate strategies even after they have left schools. Ideally, theoretical components should be directly relevant to the students' needs. They should be easy to grasp. They should be taught after sensitization. They should be recalled repeatedly during comments on hands-on translation work. With this, Alhamdulillah, we have finished the chapter, and with this excellent revision at the end. Your next reading assignment is the next article under the title Toward a Model Approach to Translation Curriculum Development. Here again, you will read before the subtitle of this development stage. So you are required to read the this article before it start discussing the development stage. So thank you very much for being attentive, and see you tomorrow inside the classroom. Allah Hafiz.